Capital Farm Credit Wednesday night podcast, our weekly look at the area athletic scene, what happened last week and what's going on this week. I'm here with my partner via Zoom, Dan Youngblood. And tonight, Dan, we're going with a little bit of a different route with our guest. We've got longtime area official Jeff Groban joining us.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to Jeff tonight. He's a guy I've gotten to know a little bit. That's one of the neat things about what we do is sharing the baseline with some of these officials. You get to know them over the years, and that's been the case with Jeff and I know that you've gotten to know him as well. So I'm excited to talk to him about just the job. That's something that not a lot of people think about unless they're yelling at the refs at a game they're at. But it's a really important job, and he does it very, very well. So I'm excited to talk to him about how he got into officiating and kind of his 33-year officiating career. So this is a guy that's been at it for a very long time, a guy who really loves what he's doing, and a guy who has a lot of interesting things to say. So I think this will be a good podcast tonight.
Okay, before we jump into this week's show, we need to thank our primary sponsor, Capital Farm Credit, with offices all over Texas, including Stanford and Abilene. Buy your own slice of Texas with Capital Farm Credit. Together, we're better. And with that, Dan, it's just about time to bring on Jeff Groban. But before we do that, I tell you what, what possesses one to become a basketball official? You got to have, it requires a very special individual. You cannot have, and we'll talk to him a little bit about this. We'll ask him this question. I cannot see anybody with an ounce of insecurity or lack of self-confidence getting out there, because it's coming, the arrows are coming from every direction, and you better have a hide as thick as a rhino to get out there.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing is, football officials take a lot of heat. You hear the boos from the stands, but you don't hear individual criticism necessarily because you're far enough away from the stands. As a basketball official, you hear everything, and some of it's really, pretty colorful. So that's the thing. I agree with you. I think that they have to have really thick skin. And the thing that kind of frustrates me as kind of someone who's at these games without any, real, stake in the outcome, is that these guys are just trying to do their best. Like they're just trying to do their jobs. And I know enough of them now from working games that I know that these guys are in it for the right reasons. So lay off these guys, folks. They're doing a really good job. And for the most part, fans are great. The fans make games. And that's the thing. I think fans, when we've learned, especially this year with the COVID protocols, fans bring a really important aspect to the game. They are a really important part for the atmosphere. I love fans. It makes games a lot more fun. You have really rowdy, loud crowds. But if you're one of those 2 or 3 people that are riding the refs after every call, blaming them for every mistake your team is making, like I said, lay off these guys a little bit. These guys are and gals. There are several women in our chapter as well that do a great job. These folks are in it for the right reasons, and you see that's why you see a lot of these folks year after year after year who have made a really strong commitment to doing this. And just to see them get ripped and knowing them personally kind of frustrates me a little bit too. You're going to disagree with calls. You're going to let that disagreement be known. I don't have a problem with that. That's just that's part of sports. I think referees understand that comes with the territory. But it's when you go over the top, and you and I have heard this. We've seen it and heard it at these games we're at, because like I said, you're right on the court. You can hear everything.
Yeah.
So when you're there, throwing out personal stuff, or you're there, with obscenities and things like that at a high school, it's probably time to reevaluate at that point. Fortunately, that is a vast minority. I think most of these fans are out there to cheer on their kids, and they're gonna, like I said, there's no problem with letting your disagreement be known. That's part of sports, right? But yeah, you know the types of people I'm talking about, and sometimes you and I have seen enough get run out of the gym.
Well, yeah, we see them get run.
We've seen them get escorted out.
I've seen people get run that had no emotional stake in the game. They don't have a son or daughter in the game. They're just some guy that shows up wanting to yell, And
yeah,
I remember when I worked for the newspaper, I wrote a column about these individuals, and I referred to them as jackasses. And a guy who was in the paper, and some people in the editorials, they were flabbergasted that would do that, and it was in the paper, and they were like, I can't believe you put that word in there. Well, that's what they are. That's what these people are. If you're going to show up, you got no emotional stake in the game. You got nothing better to do than throw out obscenities and personal insults at people and really wreck the evening for a lot of people that are sitting around. Yeah, guess what? You're a jackass.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, these officials, I know Jeff in particular, who we're about to have on. I mean, these officials have thick skin. They're going to let a lot ride. They're not going to throw you out at if it's not something pretty darn bad. But what I think is always kind of I won't say funny necessarily, but it is kind of funny, is when you see a fan that's made a drive 2.5 hour drive to a game that gets ejected in the first quarter or the second quarter. It's like, what do you do? What do you do at that point?
Yeah.
But but here's what you do: is you make better decisions and you stay in the game. But I think these officials, we've talked about it before. I think these officials do a great job. And like you said, this is a job. It's not an easy gig. This is a tough job. It's not for everybody. But those that have done it, and that's why you see some of these people that you kind of get to know because they've done it for years and years and years. I mean, these folks are doing it for the right reasons. They're doing it because they love the sport and they enjoy what they're doing. They're doing it because it's a necessary job as well. We've seen official shortages, and that can really kind of shut down games. So I, for one, have a ton of respect for what these men and women do, and I'm excited to get to hear from one tonight.
Okay, and with that, it's just about time to bring on area official Jeff Groban, who's been doing this for more than 30 years. But before we do that, we want to thank our sponsors. First and foremost, of course, Capital Farm Credit, who brings you these Wednesday night podcasts free of charge throughout the school year. Also, for Love of the Game Broadcasting, and our old friend Terry Slavens, owner of K-Lakes 93.5 FM out of Breckenridge, 97.7 FM KATX out of Eastland, Classic Country AM 1330 out of Graham, KWKQ 94.7 FM out of Graham, KROO 1430 out of Breckenridge, and KWBY 98.5 FM out of Ranger. That is for the Love of the Game Broadcasting. Also, Phil Hill of the Abilene Realtors Group, a big supporter of local athletics. If you're in the market, give him a shout at 325-669-5153 or visit his website at philhillproperties.com. And finally, Jack's Road Boring out of Snyder, dirt sales and services with experience and service that you can count on. Larry Green is the man to phone out there. Give him a shout at 325-575-8004. That's Jack's Road Boring and Snyder. And with that, Dan, it is time to bring on the man, Jeff Groban, one of the finest officials in our area. And this should be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, Jeff does a great job. That's one thing that's been fun is you get to watch and kind of get to know how certain officials call different games. And he's one that I've always enjoyed watching work, particularly with the coaches. You can tell that there's a really strong respect level there. And one thing that's kind of neat, and I've talked to him about it in the past, is that several of these coaches in the area now, he has officiated at different points in time when they were players. So that's kind of a neat deal there, where he's been around long enough that he called some of these coaches' games back when they were playing. But he does a great job. He really enjoys doing what he's doing. I've talked to him several times about in the past where he said he's thought about retiring, but he just can't pull himself away from the game because it's just so much fun. So those are the types of guys I think you want, in those roles, people who really understand the importance of what they're doing and really value what they're doing. And I was excited we were able to get him on.
All right, joining us via Zoom, area basketball official, longtime area basketball official, Jeff Groban. Mr. Groban, thank you very much for joining us.
Appreciate you guys having us.
All right, here's you've been asked this a million times, I'm sure. What got you into basketball officiating? What drew you to that?
Well, I had an old friend of mine named Jerry Tumlinson, who was a basketball official and a football official. We worked together at Texas Instruments for quite a while, and he kept telling me, you need to come to this meeting and be a referee. And he worked on me for about 5 years. So finally, I agreed to go to a meeting one day, and that's back when we met at ACU. And ever since then, here we are 33 years later, and I'm just still loving it. It's crazy.
And this thing, you've been at it 33 years, and I know that you've had thoughts at different times maybe of hanging up the whistle, but what is it that's brought you back year after year after year?
Well, Daniel, and I've even told you this, I've been trying to retire for 10 years. And every time I think about really stopping, I'm really having such a good time. And you get to playoff time, and then you get these great games, and you get to officiate with your buddies who've been around for a long time. And that's what keeps me coming back. It's just, it's that camaraderie of the officials and, getting to see all these kids grow up and watch some great basketball.
Okay, now during the regular season, it's probably pretty easy for you to plan around things. You've got ball games on Tuesday, Friday, pretty easy and, fairly close. But during the playoffs, you're looking at games that could be at Monday night, Tuesday night, Saturday, and 200-300 miles away sometimes. Can you talk about what kind of grind the playoffs are for an official?
Well, especially this year, it's been a really grind because, we were off for the week. Normally in regular seasons during playoffs, you're doing Tuesday, Friday games too. Sometimes on Saturday, sometimes on maybe a Monday or a Thursday, if the schools that we're doing have the girls or the boys playing, but this year has been kind of crazy with the week off, and this whole season been kind of crazy. So we just talked about it and said, you got to be ready to go when our secretary calls you and tells you, hey, you got a game here, hopefully you can go, because most of the people who can go a long ways away can get out of work or make arrangements to go to those games. So playoff time, you just become ready to go, because you could be called on a Wednesday and say, hey, you need to go here Thursday or Monday and Tuesday or whatever. So, and especially this year, we've been with the week off from the weather, week and a half off of the weather. It's been crazy. So playoff time, it's playoff time. You're ready to go.
This is a question I think that probably a lot of people would be interested in hearing an answer to. And as a sports journalist who's gotten my fair share of angry phone calls from folks, I know that that there are certain jobs for which angry people come with the territory, and that is certainly true of basketball officiating. I guess just talk a little bit about that, just dealing with angry fans and kind of having how you kind of develop a thick skin to kind of handle that.
Well, when I first started a long time ago, you kind of start in junior high, work your way out to varsity. And obviously the fans from 33 years ago weren't as bad as they are now, as far as letting how they feel. It really has kind of been a progression over the years. So, at first it bothers you, but then when you start doing it so long, it doesn't really bother you, unless you get the fan that gets real personal with you. And we've had to throw fans out before, we don't want to do that. But when you can't concentrate on what you're doing because you got an unruly fan, we take a lot, and that's okay. We're kind of, the guys who have been doing it a long time are kind of used to it, but it's kind of getting worse and worse every year. So we just got to do what we got to do sometimes, and if we have a problem with a fan, we'll go over to the administrator on duty and ask that fan to be removed or to calm down, either way.
You say you don't want to throw them out. You're a nice guy. I would want to throw them out,
Well, yeah. I mean, you want them, but you don't really want to, because you don't want to become, during the game, that's what everybody's talking about, and you just got to have some thick skin sometimes. You're going to get yelled at by fans. You're going to get yelled at by coaches. And you just kind of, a lot of us have been around a long time, had a pretty good reputation with fans and coaches. So we don't have it as bad as some of the younger guys coming up that have to deal, right out of the gate with middle school games and JV games of the fans that are just really kind of think everyone thinks their kid's Michael Jordan, so.
You kind of led into our next question. You kind of led into our next question. We were going to ask you about fan ejections because we've seen them. I've seen a few of them over the years.
Yeah.
I was curious about what the protocol was for ejecting one, where you can safely do that, and if they get a warning or if they're just run right off the bat. If they say something that's out of line, you can get them run.
Well, I mean, and you try to, like I said, you don't really want to do that. But if it comes down to where you have a fan like that and and they know, because you can kind of stare at them, give them a death stare and, say, hey, or that's enough or whatever. You try not to do that. You want to go to your administration, wherever the head person is on duty, and you tell them, could you go tell them to calm down? If they don't calm down, they're going to have to leave the gym. And I've been in a game before. We've thrown a person out 3 minutes into a game because they were just really bad. So, and like I said, some of the fans are becoming really bad right now, and you got to get them out of the gym, because it's taken away from the whole basketball game, it's not fair for the kids.
Plus, if they really get one, you could actually have a dangerous situation evolving, couldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, happened a couple of times too, when they, will come down and threaten you, or, threaten you with bodily harm or something like that. And that's when they're going to be out. And most places we go to and officiate, they'll have a police officer on duty, but we usually go to the administration, whoever's on duty, and they'll handle things like that. So
and obviously you have those who are, the more extreme cases where people are threatening you and are really saying things that are out of line. But how often do you have maybe a more clever heckler that maybe says something that might, does that ever happen where someone says something that that does kind of get you laughing a little bit up and down?
Oh, it does. I mean, it's kind of funny you say that, because while we're officiating games, you hear people up in the stands going 1, 2, 3, 4. I go, hey, you guys can count good. Like we don't know what 3 seconds is, or a 5-second count, or a 10-second count. And those are the ones you kind of laugh at, because they don't know that when a shot goes up, you get to restart the clock, the 3-second count or something like that. So yeah, we hear some pretty funny stuff sometimes, but it's kind of like when they yell other stuff, you just kind of laugh to yourself a little bit and just go on. You're trying to pay attention to the game and what you're doing, and make sure you're out there to protect the kids and make them safe and officiate a good ball game.
And you mentioned this earlier as well. I mean, there are coaches that'll ride you a little bit too. Y'all kind of take it from all directions in terms of the criticism there. But I guess behind the scenes, what are those interactions like, and kind of what is that communication like? Because I know there's a respect level between the coaches and officials that sometimes doesn't exist with the fans. But what is the communication like between coaches and officials behind the scenes?
It's always really pretty good behind the scenes. We know as officials that that's their job as coaches to get wins, and we don't want to get in their way of their basketball team. We're just trying to officiate a good basketball game. And some of the coaches that will yell at you or this and that, and we try to explain the best we can what we're doing or what's going on. And then usually after the game's over, they're going, hey, they came back and they go, hey, you guys did a great job. I'm just fighting for my team, or I'm just, working for my girls or working for my guys or something like that. So, I've had a really good relationship with pretty much all the coaches I've had. I haven't really had a bad one with anybody. When I see one, I'll run into them and I'll say, hey, coach, and hey, ref for you a long time ago, or something like that. I ran into Coach Lombard this weekend doing the Canyon game, and it was kind of good to see him and his son taking over there. So it's always a pretty good interaction after the game. During the game, they're trying to win for their kids and fight for their kids. So,
Coach, who are some of the area coaches who are the best at working the referees, working the officials? Who are some of the masters?
Man, this might get me in trouble. I don't know.
Now, not in a derogatory sense, in a derogatory sense, but in a complimentary sense. Some of the coaches who are, say, masters at working the crew.
Well, one of my favorite coaches of all time is Coach Cooley out at Jim Ned. He very seldom complains, very seldom talks down to you. And when Coach Cooley asks you a question, you listen to him, because he doesn't complain very much, so he's really good. Coach Reese from Abilene High is really good. Coach Conover is really good. They're basketball guys. They know you're out there trying your best, and they'll ask you. Sometimes they yell at you, and that's okay. They're fighting for their team, but they respect you when you come up and tell them, hey, coach, this is what I saw, or something like that. So those guys are, real professional about when they talk to you, and sometimes they scream at you. Coach Case was one of my favorites. Coach Case used to give us an earful all the time, but after the game, he came in and said, you guys did a great job, and I appreciate you. So I've been dealing with Coach Case for 30 years, and he's always complimenting you. And if I ever run to any of these coaches at the grocery store or at the mall or where I work, they've always been very complimentary about and appreciative of what we do.
All right, now you've officiated both boys and girls basketball. Tell us about the challenges. Which is more difficult to officiate?
Well, that's a great question. It's not really difficult. It's just obviously the boys are a faster game. They move quicker, they jump higher. So it's, you got to be on your toes just a hair more when you're doing a boys game, especially a high level boys game, because they're going to get up and down the court. But tactical wise, girls games are better because they can't do all the high jumping and the this and that. So they have to kind of work the ball around, set good screens, things like that. So that way it's enjoyable to watch too, when you get a really, really good girls game to watch. So
now, am I crazy, or is the girls game? I've always insisted this. And if I look at the photos that I take of the games afterwards, you can see the contact in the photo. I've always insisted that the girls game, especially in the paint area, is rougher than the boys game. Am I wrong?
No, I agree with you 100%. Well, because the guys move so much quicker. Unless you have a big 6'8" guy, 6'9" guy who play in the middle, it's shooting 3-pointers now. Who can get up down the court faster? It's a faster game. And the girls game, if you got a couple girls that can shoot 3-pointers, that's what they're going to do. But if not, if they have a tall girl, they're going to work the ball into a taller girl. And there is a lot of contact, and everybody knows when you get to the playoff time, you kind of let a little more contact go, because you don't want to be the cause of the game. You want to let them, finish the results of the game and have them decide the game. So.
And you kind of touched on my next question, talking about getting up and down the floor, being on your toes. Are those types of games, the ones that are fast paced, full court, up and down, are those more difficult to officiate or more challenging in your opinion?
I think they're easier because you have to make sure and stay in the game all the time. When you're officiating an Abilene High, a Cooper, a Wiley, that the guys get up and down the court really well. The other day we had Glen Rose and Decatur, and that's just up and down basketball, and it kind of keeps your mind going all the time to make sure you get up and down the court, make sure you see what's going, and you're hustling. So we kind of like those kind of games because it keeps you in the game really good, and you got to make sure and be paying attention all the time, which we do even if it's a slow down game. But those kind of games, you really got to pay attention and know where you want to be, and make sure you're rotating good, make sure you're seeing everything. And that's the good thing about having 3 officials in a game too, that you get to cover the basis a little bit better.
Is there any room in officiating for a person who lacks self-confidence, isn't self-assured? I'm guessing that you guys, that's a must. You have to have that.
Absolutely. Because everybody in our chapter thinks they're the best official in the chapter. And if you don't think you're the best official in the chapter, you're not going to be up in the upper echelon of officials, because you have to have an ego. You've got to think that you can run with the 6A boys or the 5A boys or the 6A girls. You got to be able to say, oh, I can ref that game. So everybody in our chapter thinks they're the best official, which is great, because everybody should think that way.
When you have that call that's borderline and you're going to have to make that call, I know baseball and softball officials, when you go to baseball, softball umpiring school, when you have a play that's a 50-50 play, they tell the umpires, you got to sell the call. You got to be animated and sell the call. Is that the way you guys operate when you have that call that is going to get a reaction either way?
Absolutely. And that's the whole part of making that call, because, the hardest call in basketball is a block charge. Hardest call. Because when you got 3 officials, and one of them thinks it's a block and one of them thinks it's a charge, well, the one that comes in and really aggressive and that's a block, and you do your, your hands, and you had your hand up and you're loud. And if you're loud and clear and very sure of yourself, you can sell a call, even if you made a bad call. So one thing about our officials, and we talked about this Saturday while we were going to do the Canyon game, is, coaches appreciate sometimes if you make a mistake, if you just tell them, Coach, I think I might have missed that. We might have missed that as a crew. And they appreciate that more. And then they won't, complain so much. But most of the coaches around that have been around a while, when you tell them, Coach, we might have missed that, or, something, and we can't make every perfect call. We're going to miss calls. That's just the way it is. And they appreciate more when you tell them that you just flat out missed one sometimes.
And that kind of leads me into the next question, where we're all human. We all make mistakes. There are going to be times where you probably know that you might have blown a call. I was going to ask you about dealing with that, but just kind of how lonely a feeling is that when you know that you probably didn't get the call right?
We don't like that at all. We do not like making bad calls. I hate when I miss a call or make a bad call, or one goes 50-50, like Evan was saying. We want to get every call right. We really do. And it does bother us. It bothers the people who care about it so much, like me and the guys that have been doing it for a long time. We don't want to make mistakes, but we do. It's just part of officiating. And you kind of learn that as you're coming up, that you're going to make mistakes. And we try to tell that to our young officials. You're going to make mistakes sometime. You don't want to make a mistake, but you do. So we just kind of take it and figure out, what can we do better next time, to try not to make that mistake again. And most of the time, when you make a bad call, as soon as you've made that call, you made a bad call, and you just sell it like Evan did, said, and do the best you can. And if a coach reams you, I'll sit there and let him ream me if I made a bad call, and just take it like a man, So, yeah.
Now, when you guys are sharing stories amongst each other, what is like, if there was a number one funny story, an anecdote that you share with other officials or fans or friends about your experiences on the road, what is that story that maybe you could share with us?
Well, my favorite story of officiating was one of our local guys who's retired and moved down south, Bruce Jones, who is around forever. He ref basketball, football, and volleyball. We got to do a lot of games together. And I'd probably say, 10, 12, 13 years ago, when Coach Rodney G was at Eastland, and we were doing an Eastland and Cisco game at Eastland. And one of the funniest things ever, it was so crowded in the gym, you couldn't hear anything. And we had a play that something happened, and Coach G used to just stomp his foot all the time. So he stomped his foot and called timeout and called me and Bruce over. And we walked over to him, and he was red. He was yelling so bad. And Bruce put his arm around him and asked him, "Coach, you like apple pie or cherry pie?" Just like that. And Coach G looked at him and said, "Are you kidding me?" And it was over. And we just laughed. That's one of the coolest stories ever.
You've mentioned that that when you start officiating, that you start in junior high and JV and work your way up. I guess just describe kind of how you got into officiating varsity games.
When I started, Coach Gober, who was at Cooper for a long time, who's now at Waxahachie, he called, and he coached in Dallas for a while. But my second year, I didn't have any varsity games in my first couple of years. And I did the Abilene High Cooper JV game when he was coaching the JV. This is when Andre Patterson was playing. And I teed him up and during that game, and he called our secretary the next day and said, "Jeff Groban should be doing varsity basketball games." And he lost. And he just thought I was a good official, that I stood up to him and didn't let him push me around. And he's the one that gave me a big start. Next year, I got varsity games, and I got invited to do the Polk City tournament, which was the big boys tournament back 30 years ago. So,
nice.
Yeah, pretty cool story.
How are you guys doing on numbers? Because I know that with football, it's a struggle. And I mean, we've seen JV games canceled because they could not get an officiating crew there. How are you guys doing in Texas overall in officiating numbers?
Well, last year we had probably our best numbers in a long time. We had about 140 to 160 officials last year. This year we had a lot of officials not even come out because of the COVID. And we were kind of worried about that. And last year we had picked up some schools, or a couple of years ago, like going to Stephenville and, going to other places. So our numbers are a little down, obviously, this year. And we did have a hard time covering JV games, junior high games. And we've actually had to turn back some varsity games because we just didn't have the numbers. And, last year I probably called, I'd say maybe about probably 40 or 50, 55 games. I've called more than that already this year because we've had to go a lot more because of our numbers being down. You know, I've covered junior high a couple nights this year, and this year we did JV and varsity instead of doing varsity girls and varsity boys this year. So our numbers are definitely down. Last year we had our best numbers. We were doing really good. If you wanted to, you know, sit out a night, you could sit out a night. And this year it was really hard to do that.
This is a question we ask a lot of our coaches, kind of put them in a position where they're king for a day. But I think it'll be interesting from your perspective, because you're kind of on the other side of this. But we ask them often, kind of, if there was one rule that they might change, and I was wondering if there might be one rule that you would like to see change, or maybe a rule that could be changed, maybe to be more easily officiated.
I think the high school needs a shot clock. You know, it's kind of aggravating when you see a team pull it out and just hold it at half court and just stand there. And that kind of irritates me. I mean, I know what they want to do, because if your team's not as good as one team and you're going to try to stall to do that, I really like to see high schools get a shot clock, which I think would be very hard for them to do, because I know the expense of getting it put up and, you know, things like that, and having to train all officials, you know, to do it would be tough. But I think that's one of the biggest thing. You know, most of the rules have been pretty set, the same ones for quite a long time. There hasn't been really a lot of change in the regular basketball rules, but I would love to see high school get a shot clock. And some people like that and some people don't, you know, agree with that. So
Mr. Groban, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time, and I'm sure we will see you here on the road very soon.
I'm sure you will. I appreciate you guys. You guys do a great job with your stories. I always follow them. I always see you guys at the games working hard. So we appreciate you too. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Good night.
Appreciate it.
And that was longtime area basketball official Jeff Groban. I've been around the big country for a long time. I like to have a dollar for every basketball game I've covered that guy was running up and down the court. I've seen him run for a long time.
Yeah, he's been at it for a very long time. Like he said, 33 years. And I know from personal conversations I've had with him, he's talked at different times about retiring, about hanging up the whistle, and kind of leaving that part of his life behind him. But he just tells me every year that he just can't, that he's having too much fun. So I think that's neat. I mean, that's a job that, I mean, is not everybody's cut out for that. That's a tough job. That's a tough gig that he's got, and he does it really, really well.
Yeah, you can throw me in that group. You can throw me in that group. There's no way. There is no way. You know, I mean, if I were out there, fans would be getting run left and right. I mean, left and right. I'd probably be the first official to get run.
Yeah, that job probably requires a little more patience than you have in dealing with angry people. But and I've seen him, like you said, I've been at a lot of events that he has over the 13 years I've been out here. And he does that part really, really well. He's very good with people. He's very good with coaches. I mean, I think I was looking in the pictures when we were preparing for this podcast. I was looking at some pictures, and about half of them are him getting reamed out by one coach or another. But he's that's something that he doesn't take that stuff personally. He understands that's part of the job, and you can tell that it's when he is on the court that he's trying to be, you know, that objective observer, making the best call he can make in every situation. So I really respect the job he does. I really respect the way that he handles people in doing that job. And I enjoyed talking with him. He, like I said, I thought at the outset that he'd have a lot of interesting things to say, and sure enough, he did.
And with that, it's time to close the books on this week's Capital Farm Credit Wednesday night podcast. But before we do that, we want to remind you that we have 3 separate subscription packages here at bigcountrypreps.com. We've got a monthly for $5 a month. We've got a semi-annual where we knock that price down to $4 a month for a 6-month subscription. And then we've got an annual, a full year subscription where we knock the price down to $3 a month. $36 for a full year of Big Country High School athletic coverage. And here at Big Country Preps, your prices stay the same. They stay low and reasonable, and they remain that way. We don't start you off with a ridiculously low rate, and then when you're not looking, jack that price up. It stays the same here.
And we'd also like to remind you that if you see a photo you like in any one of our galleries, it is available for just $7. You can click that small shopping cart icon to the bottom right, follow that prompt, and purchase as many of those as you would like. But scrolling around the site, you probably noticed that we take a lot of photos. That's something we really enjoy doing when we're at these games. And it's something we're really proud of here at bigcountrypreps.com.
All Big Country, all high school, all the time. Welcome home.